Hey there, it's Mark from MENWHOBULLET. Thanks for checking out today's video where we're going to be setting up a weekly spread inside of our bullet journal. Let's go over supplies real quick. First supply I have here is going to be my mechanical pencil, which is a Uniball Chroma. Love the color, love the eraser on this one. I also have a black multi-liner from Mr. Pen, which we're going to be using today as well. And my old school, love this Tombow gray pen. It's a light gray. I'll show you why I love light gray so much when building anything inside of my bullet journal. We also have a clear ruler here that we're going to be using, and I'm going to be pulling out a new stamp that I got. I got a nice little stamp collection from a recent craft store visit from Heidi Swap, and we're going to be using this fun one down here that has the definitions of success on here. I like that one a lot inside of here. You're also going to need ink for this, so I have my VersaFine black ink pad that we're going to be using. I always like to pre-plan out an idea before I go into my bullet journal, so I'm going to be using one of my reusable whiteboard post-it notes here from Quick Canary. These are so much fun to use and reuse, as a matter of fact. So this is going to be a double page spread that I'm going to set up, and it's going to be pretty simplistic. I'm just going to set up 6 boxes, but I'm not going to go all the way to the edges. I'm actually going to leave some spaces where we're going to put the stamp, and then we're going to put a shadow around these boxes to help elevate that off of the page over top of the letters. Now that we have all of our materials and a rough outline of what our page is going to look like, let's go ahead and get into our bullet journal and set up this page. The first thing I'm going to do is go back to my grid space cheat sheet, which I set up inside of my bullet journal. You can check out the full breakdown of this in my recent bullet journal setup video, which I'll link up above here. But what I love about this page is it helps me quickly and easily find the spacing that I'm going to need for the pages that I'm going to be building out. In this case, I'm really going to only focus over on the left-hand side, which is my vertical spacing. The way that I have this set up right now is for a full page spread. I'm not going to use all of the space vertically, but I am going to still use the general layout here of this. And what I like is that I have 2 variances, one that has 1 space in between and one that has 2 spaces in between. So for this one, I'm going to go along with the 1 space in between and just shorten these lines up just a little bit. Let me show you exactly what I'm talking about. Usually in my videos, I will pre-sketch out a lot of these layouts, but I'm not going to do that today because I want to show you how you can take a general layout and alter it for your needs, specifically on what you want to do with it. So I've got my pencil here. I'm always going to start with my pencil first, and that way if I make any mistakes I can easily erase them. And then I do have my ruler just to create some of those straight lines. So I'm going to actually start from the bottom of the page and work my way up, and I'm going to count 10 spaces from the bottom up. I'll make a mark. I'm going to leave 1 space for that gap in between each of these boxes, and I'll continue that 10 box spacing all the way up the page until I have my 3 rows. I'm going to leave the space here at the top because I'm going to put in our May header, and I'm also going to leave room at the top here for some trackers as well. If you mark from the inside of your left page, you can actually just copy those exact lines over to the right hand side. It's going to reflect on both sides. I also want to give myself some general spacing that I'm going to need for the width of these boxes, so I'm going to pull out my Heidi Swap stamp that I'm going to be using and just lay it here on the page, and I'm going to find right in the center of the stamp is where I'm going to put a mark. And that's what I'm going to use on both sides over here for that. This stamp specifically is 5 spaces from the left-hand side. So now what I'll do is go through and I'm just going to lightly draw in all of the spaces that I'm going to need for each one of these. I always like to double count, make sure that I'm lining myself up correctly as I go through, and then I can easily draw out the rest of these squares across the page. Before I go in with my fine liner, what I'm going to do is actually stamp on the pages first, and then that way I'll follow up with the pen afterwards. This is the part that's going to take the most amount of time just because we're dealing with ink and we're dealing with stamps. Now, to make sure that I don't get extra stamp on my page, what I'm going to do is grab this scrap piece of paper that I have here that I did some other stamping on recently, and I'm going to lay that right on the edge of my boxes. And that way when I ink this stamp and I press it onto the page, the extra ink will get on top of this scrap piece of paper and not on the inside of my box. I always forget to remind that you are going to need an acrylic block if you're using these type of clear stamps. They just stick right to the stamp. And then what you can do is take your ink, and we're going to go ahead and press that on top of the stamp and get that nice and coated with ink. And I'm going to make sure that my scrap piece of paper here is lined up pretty well, and then I'm going to go ahead and lay this down and press it down onto the page. Turned out pretty good. So let's go ahead and continue that all the way up the left-hand side. Now that we're here at the top, we're going to do the final press here and get this onto the page. And then what we'll do is go ahead and, drop our stamp right on the page. Oh man. All right, it's paper. It's okay. It's a mistake. Let's keep going. Now, when I laid this one down here, you'll see that it didn't stamp down all the way. I'm not sure why it didn't. I could leave it, but let's go ahead and try. Sometimes I can get away with doing another press on this stamp. I don't think it's going to line up perfectly, but let's see what happens. Nope, didn't do what I needed to. For some reason, I'm not getting even pressure across the stamp. So we're going to leave it before I make it any worse, and we'll just, have a little extra mistake on the page. We already have the ink on the other side. Might as well have a messy page this time around. Now that I've made 2 mistakes on this page so far as we're doing this video, I just want to be extra cautious. Something that I might do in the future is actually just use some washi tape, maybe to hold this paper into place as I'm stamping, and also make sure that my page is nice and flat, and I'm putting equal pressure across it to make things work out. So there we go. Not too bad. 4 out of 6. Now that we have all of the stamps down first, not sure that that was the best thing to do, but it is what it is. I'll go in with my multi-liner now and fill in all of the extra box spaces that I have around on these pages. And then the next thing we'll do after this is show you how to use your gray Tombow marker to create a really cool elevated highlight underneath each one of these boxes. All right, we have all the pencil lines now erased off of our page. So the last detail that I'm going to add with the markers before we do our headers and trackers is just creating a really cool drop shadow on these boxes. I mentioned earlier that the reason I like to use these light gray Tombow markers is because you can add as many layers as you want to make that gray as dark as you want, or with one quick pass of it, it's super light. If you go straight with a dark marker, you don't have the option to make it lighter or darker. So I always just like to use this light gray one because it works wonderfully, especially when you're trying to find the right level of darkness for your drop shadow. I like to be relatively quick about these. It doesn't have to be a perfect science, but I'll just take my Tombow marker here and I'm going to pull that gray across the bottom of all of my boxes. Then what I'll do is pull it vertically down on the left-hand side to meet the bottom there. This is a really fast and super easy way to create really cool drop shadows. And then I'll go over it one more time just because I do want a little bit extra darkness on top of here, and you'll see it really helps elevate that box above those stamps. We are now done with all of our boxes. The last thing I am going to do for those are going to put in the days of the week, Monday through Friday, and then I have extra space for notes in the bottom corner over here. You could also use that space for a weekend if you wanted to. Not a whole lot going on over the weekends for me recently, so I like to use the space for notes instead. Across the top, because we left this extra space, I'm going to do 2 things. Over on the left-hand side, I'm going to put my May header. What I'm going to do here is just use a font that I like. What I do is on the left-hand side, I like to create a rectangle or a box for the letter that I'm making, and then all of the other lines are going to be straight lines. And then what I'll do is come back over and put a pattern inside of that open box. In this case, I'm just going to use these horizontal lines. It gives it a really cool, fun look without being too basic, but not overdoing it. So if you're not super confident in your lettering or anything like that, this is a nice and easy font that you can create for yourself. Now that I'm thinking about it, I do also want to put the days of the week or the date for each one of those days too, just for easy reference as I'm going through my week. I have a love-hate with trackers. I really think that they are awesome, especially when you're tracking something that means a lot to you, but I don't always have success with trackers. So the 2 things that I've had the most success tracking in my past are 2 things that kind of go hand in hand, at least I think so. The first one on the left-hand side is going to be my sleep tracker. I just like to pay attention to how much sleep I'm getting and usually how I feel that day. There's always a connection between that. And then over on the right-hand side is going to be a smaller tracker, which I'm going to use for water consumption. Same general idea. If I drink a lot of water, usually I feel pretty good about myself. And if I get enough sleep, I'm feeling great too. So these things are easy to track, something that I personally like to pay attention to, and we don't need a super complex tracker to track these things. I'm only making this decision right now, but I got an extra stamp set from Heidi Swap here that I got on that last visit, and I think this is a perfect reason to use this one. Underneath here it says perfectly imperfect, and since I made 2 mistakes on this page as I was stamping before, this is just a good reminder for myself that, guess what? It's not always going to be perfect, and that's okay. It's only paper, and I'll pay more attention to how I'm stamping in the future. And one little stamp here to go on the very top here. It's all good. Gotta remind yourself of that sometimes. I'm going to add one last little detail here to the top of my page, just a little light gray drop shadow underneath the stamp on the right hand side here. And then I'm also just going to color in the open space on my May letters that I have over here. And that's going to be our setup here, Monday through Wednesday on the left, with Thursday, Friday, and a notes section over on the right. We've got our trackers in the top and also our header. Thanks so much for checking out this video today, and I'll talk to you very soon. See ya.